All right. Happy Wednesday, everyone. And it's not just any Wednesday. No, it's Jane Addams Day. Now, for those who might be confused as to why I'm mentioning a woman born in 1860, I felt there were some similarities to our presenter today. Jane was a women's rights advocate, a pacifist, and a progressive. Those monikers might also be used when describing Sarah Gutterman, co-founder and CEO of Green Builder Media. Sarah is a former venture capitalist who graduated cum laude from Dartmouth College and holds an MBA in entrepreneurship and finance from the University of Colorado. She established a reputation as a visionary thought leader and passionate advocate for sustainability, and she works closely with a diverse group of stakeholders in the building industry to develop impactful, long-term green strategies that are simultaneously sustainable and profitable. Now, Sarah is here to give her annual State of the Industry address, and you know that means she's going to share some of that wonderful Cognition Smart data with all of us. Now, today's webinar would not be possible without our sponsors. We have PowerShift by NV Energy. PowerShift is a program that helps residential and business customers conserve energy and save money on their power bills. PowerShift is a one-stop resource to find energy-efficient products and services. For more information, please visit their website at nvenergy.com/PowerShift. Opta Group is a global leader in delivering custom-engineered additives, specialty equipment, and technical expertise. The company offers Opta Glass, a low-carbon concrete that integrates finely milled, post-consumer reclaimed glass into the cement mix to create a more structurally sound, sustainable concrete. Whirlpool Corporation is committed to being the best global kitchen and laundry company in constant pursuit of improving life at home. In an increasingly digital world, the company is driving purposeful innovation to meet the evolving needs of consumers. And we also have Carrier. They are a leader in high technology heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration solutions. Carrier designs smart features tailored to how people live, work, and play. Regardless of how a space is used, Carrier remains committed to enhancing comfort and reimagining what it feels or what it means to feel at home. Now, you can submit questions for Sarah. Simply use the Q&A function near the bottom of the Zoom window. I'll review those questions and pose those to her during the Q&A time set aside after her presentation. Sarah, how are you?
Mike, thank you, as always, for being such a wonderful moderator. Thanks for that intro. That was lovely. And also a special thank you to Mary Kestner, our production manager, who is behind the scenes. I call her our wizard behind the curtain. She makes it all happen. So Mike and Mary, thank you for always making everything look so seamless. Thank you also to everyone here. I really appreciate your time. I know that everyone is incredibly busy. I'm very happy that you're here today for our annual State of the Industry report and webinar. Thank you also, of course, to our generous sponsors, Carrier, PowerShift by NV Energy, Whirlpool, and Opta Group with Opta Glass. You are not only leaders in our sector, paving the way to more sustainable manufacturing and product development, but we couldn't do our work without you. So thank you very much to our sponsors. I am particularly excited about this year's State of the Industry. We've uncovered some incredibly interesting insights over the course of the past year, through conversations and anecdotes with our building professional as well as our consumer audience, and also through our Cognition Smart data. So before I dive into that, for any of you who are not familiar with Green Builder Media, we are North America's leading media company focused on green building and sustainable living. We do a lot of different things, of course, starting with our media and communications. We have a really robust spectrum of online, mobile, digital, and social media, print, one publication, Green Builder Magazine, through which those integrated media channels, we reach a hybrid trade and consumer audience. That is important because Cognition Smart Data, which is our market intelligence and data services division, I will be sharing a lot of Cognition Smart Data with you today, but we're able to harvest a tremendous amount of insights from our trade and consumer audience. So that's why I like to explain who we reach and how we reach them. In addition to our media channels and Cognition Smart Data, we have Cognition Academy, which is our sustainability curriculum. We do vision houses, which are our suite of demonstration projects. We do events and lots of special programs, Housing 2.0 with Sam Rashkin. Many of you have heard about that, as well as a program focused on homeowners called Today's Homeowner. So, with that context, I'm going to dive in. I think we all know that 2025 has been a hard year. I think sometimes the fear of uncertainty is more paralyzing than the actual dynamics of the economy themselves. And I think that that was true this year. I think with uncertain tariffs, with incentives that were on again, off again, with affordability challenges, I think that a lot of building professionals, manufacturers, and consumers who were feeling the pinch really felt like they should put themselves on the sidelines because of that uncertainty. And I think that there were some very real dynamics that did impact the economy: high mortgage rates, high interest rates. There was still fairly low inventory because the lock-in effect from the pandemic is still in place to a certain degree. Certainly, affordability challenges, as I've mentioned, those all impacted the economy. And then I think that there were some cracks in our housing system that really stopped being theoretical and showed up in 2025, and everything from blown transformers and rolling outages to flooded neighborhoods and redlined insurance maps, data center proposals that promised jobs and tax revenue but quietly locked in communities into these soaring energy bills and unsustainable water demand in families who could, quote, afford a house on paper, but then once they got into those homes, the actual cost of living blew up their budgets, and in building professionals who just weren't quite sure how to navigate the uncertainty of the market today. But I think beneath all of that pressure and stress, 2025 was also a year of clarity and innovation. So we'll talk a lot about those dynamics today. I think, one of the things that really became clear this year is as federal incentives that had been put in place through the Inflation Reduction Act. So things like 45L, which provided incentives for builders to build to Energy Star or Zero Energy Ready certification. In fact, 45L, that tax credit, increased the number of Energy Star certified homes from about 125,000 to about 350,000 across the US, representing about a quarter of all new homes built. So that is expiring in June of 2026. The 25C credit, which has offered tax benefits to homeowners for qualified energy efficient and electrification home improvements like heat pumps and HVAC and water heaters, those will expire the end of this month. We're seeing the sunsetting of a lot of solar incentives, the residential solar tax credit under 25D, as well as credits for EVs. With all of those sunsetting, we are seeing some builders and homeowners pull back from energy efficiency, solar plus storage, and electrification upgrades. With that said, what the sunsetting of those incentives due to the One Big Beautiful Bill has caused is really what I like to call the tale of two types of builders. So we've seen some large builders pull back from sustainability commitments and performance requirements that they had set internally with their divisions, to revert to basically extracting sustainability from the homes that they build so that they could get to the lowest cost per square foot while still building to code or being legal in order to reduce costs and boost profitability. So that's kind of one type of builder. But then we've seen other builders like Beazer and like Sekisui House and Mattamy who are staying resolute in their sustainability commitments. They've said, look, we've made the investment, we've made the commitment, we're putting our brand and our reputation behind these performance and health and wellness standards and solar plus storage upgrades, and these are going to be the baseline. We want to sell a higher value home to our buyers. And so we're seeing a bit of a divergence between even the leading production builders that we haven't really seen in this sense before. What we also have seen is that there's a kind of a basic understanding now that sustainability solutions have to become, I'm going to call them transactional, meaning they have to be integrated into a business model, a commitment like what I just talked about, in order to drive differentiation and enhanced profits and value for buyers and customers, rather than being seen as something that's a cost center. And the builders and developers and other professionals and even manufacturers who are doing that are actually the ones that are not only differentiating themselves, but really leveraging sustainability to boost profits. And that's a long-term strategy that they're committing to, regardless of any kind of federal changes and who's in the White House or even who's in Congress. And we're seeing that again, these sustainability solutions, they really have to stand toe to toe with conventional solutions. Unfortunately, many of them are able to now. And I think that was a transition that we saw in 2025 with the sunsetting of those federal incentives. Where folks said, look, this is a long-term strategy. We're going to see housing cycles, we're going to see ebbs and flows of incentives and rebates and different types of stimulus funding for sustainability solutions. But what we really have to do is stand up and understand how to make the numbers work, regardless of kind of what's happening in that kind of external world, so that the market itself is actually dictating the selection and the specification of those types of solutions. Along with that realization that these sustainable solutions drive profitability and drive differentiation, we've also seen, regardless of what's happening at the federal level, at the state and municipal level, there are continued ratcheting codes and standards. So, of course, California is leading the way, along with Massachusetts, who now have requirements for large buildings to disclose carbon emissions and greenhouse gas impacts, scope 1, 2, and 3 in California. We've seen in Massachusetts, there's now net zero carbon requirements and planning that builders and developers have to show when they go in to get permits. And we're seeing other states like New York, New Jersey, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, New Mexico following suit. And what we're seeing from that is that there are these new risks emerging for builders and developers and other related professionals where there's new non-compliance fees or permitting delays or reputational exposure if they're not implementing those long-term planning strategies for decarbonization, for net zero energy, for net zero water in some municipalities. Of course, we're also seeing that the new 2024 and 2026 code cycles are going to include carbon operational and embodied carbon reporting and ratings. So we'll see how that plays out. And I think that the ResNet 1550 standard, which will streamline the measurement of embodied carbon in homes that we should see sometime in 2026 will really help to push through those codes and standards on a municipal and a state level, because there will be a benchmark measurement that can be utilized and pulled through that can, again, really kind of streamline and level the playing field, so to speak. Now, of course, as a part of this perfect storm pushing us towards enhanced decarbonization and sustainability, we cannot for a minute discount what's happening with soaring and exploding consumer demand. There was a recent report published by Harvard that showed that products with sustainability labels, so maybe that was Amazon's Climate Pledge Friendly or Target's Target Zero or Wayfair's Shop Sustainability, performed better across all sectors of all types of products throughout the economy. And that really resonates with all of the data that we have collected through Cognition Smart Data. And here's a couple of data points that I think are important to point out. Cognition data has shown for many years, and these are recent data points, that 70% of our consumer audience, now again, we do reach early adopter and first movers, we reach millions of early adopter and first mover consumers, the majority of whom right now are millennial and Gen Z homeowners and aspiring homeowners. But again, our early adopter audience is really indicative of what's penetrating into the mainstream and where the mainstream audience will be in the next maybe 6 to 12 months. So 70% of our consumers consider sustainability a key factor in their purchasing decisions. 75% report that they're more likely to purchase a product from a company with strong sustainability practices over one without. 60% believe that sustainable companies are more likely to have long-term success. Three-quarters have stopped purchasing products because of concerns over a company's sustainability practices. And then this is really one of the most interesting data points to me. About 80% of our audience believe that a company's sustainability practices impacts the quality of its products and services. Now, whether or not that's the case, that's the perception, and that's pretty undeniable. So, when you have these numbers that continue to grow in terms of, consumer preference for sustainability, at some point they just become undeniable. And I will say that I think this past year, those numbers really hit that tipping point where they're just simply undeniable. And, regardless of, again, what's happening at a federal level, the market markers are very clear. So, in response to what's happening at the federal level, but also really what's happening in terms of consumer demand, Green Builder Media has initiated an effort to look at the veracity of how we are actually measuring the homes that we build and that we design and build and remodel. And we are submitting to our audience that the price per square foot metric is no longer applicable and that we have to move on from that. And let me give you a little bit of context for the price per square foot metric and why it's no longer applicable. So, housing, starting in the Great Depression, right, in the 30s, was very localized. So, the government in the 1930s created savings and loans institutions, or S&Ls. And those S&Ls would lend to local builders who would build homes for local families. And those local families would invest in local businesses and they would support communities. And these were homes that provided safety and security and resiliency and comfort. Then in the 1980s, when the S&L crisis happened, Wall Street got into the housing market and houses effectively became commodities. And the price per square foot metric was created and implemented because honestly, it was easy. It was something that was kind of a broad stroke where large public builders and investors could say, okay, well, this is just a metric where we can compare apples to apples. And so that's where price per square foot came from. However, if we fast forward to today, the price per square foot metric is no longer applicable because it does not accurately actually measure the real value of homes that are being offered today. It does not include decarbonization, so embodied and operational carbon, or regulatory and market risk. It does not include energy performance, so efficiency, renewables, independence, predictable utility bills. It does not include resiliency or durability, outage survival, recovery costs from climate disasters. It does not include health and wellness, indoor air quality, mental health, sleep, acoustic comfort. It does not include water efficiency, reliability, quality, scarcity. Nor does it include community access, mobility services, social cohesion, connection to nature, or generational wealth. So, what we are advocating is this shift in valuation metric from price per square foot to value per square foot, so that the builders and the developers that are offering higher performance, healthy, resilient, more comfortable, safer homes actually can recognize the value for their homes more accurately. And when we survey our audience, it is very clear that they are no longer looking at that price per square foot metric anymore when making home buying decisions. Rather, they are looking at value per square foot or total monthly cost. They're incorporating the long-term total cost of home ownership into those decisions more than, again, just looking at upfront cost. It's time that we shift this evaluation metric in order to differentiate the homes that are more sustainable from the homes that aren't. And ultimately, who benefits most from that? The builders and developers and the home buyers. Now, in order to do all of this, and I'm not going to, kind of cover everything that we want to communicate about this. We've got blogs, we'll have more webinars, we'll have an event at the Builders Show to delve into this. But ultimately, we need other stakeholders. It's not just about the builders and the developers and other related professionals and the home buyers themselves. It's about lenders who can come up with creative mortgages that can incorporate energy efficiency and electrification and solar upgrades, because they can also incorporate lower utility costs into those mortgages. It includes the appraisers and the realtors. It also includes the insurance companies, and I'll talk more about that in a little while, because resilient homes should get lower insurance premiums. They're not in all cases right now, which is a shame. So I mentioned that, again, our consumer audience across the board, the four generations that are influencing the housing market, boomers, Xers, millennials, and Zs, are all now considering long-term cost, and more so, or at least as importantly as upfront cost. This is a new data point. Actually, last year when we asked this question for the first time, the boomer numbers were higher, the Xer numbers were lower in terms of long-term value and operating costs, but I think Xers are actually feeling particularly pinched right now, so they're looking at those long-term costs. And again, we see that every time we ask a question about, what are you thinking about as you're buying home or remodeling homes, lowest upfront cost, lowest long-term cost, best investment potential, a lot of financial related things, which is obviously not surprising in today's economy. We also know that across the board, younger homeowners are more willing to pay for sustainability upgrades like energy efficiency, electrification, healthy home, water conservation, solar plus storage, resiliency, if those upgrades will lower their operating costs over time, more so than boomers and Xers. And then we also asked a question this year because a lot of our builder and developer and manufacturer partners asked, okay, well, that's great that these consumers are saying that they'll pay more, but how much will they pay? So our consumer audience is telling us that about 35% are saying that they'll pay about 5% more. Nearly 25% say that they'll pay about 10% more. So there's some willingness to pay more than nothing, we'll say, for these sustainability upgrades. So that's a tip to all of our building professional and manufacturer partners to say, when you are messaging about either the homes you're delivering or the products that you're delivering for those homes, be sure to tie in operational costs into your messaging and how your products or your homes will lower those costs. We see again when we ask why our consumers would choose a high performance home, lower monthly costs. Again, the economic elements continue to come up as the primary factors for decision making, better comfort and indoor air quality, resiliency. Those things are certainly in the mix, but it's just really about the economy, stupid. And then we also know that I'm going to switch over to some of our builder data. We know that builders, despite the fact that there was a bit of a freeze in the housing market, home sales were a bit sluggish this year, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Most of our builder colleagues and audience tell us that they're just keeping calm and carrying on. In fact, if any of you were at the EBA conference this year, a few months ago, that is literally the term that kept coming out of builders' mouths, during panels, that they were just keeping calm and carrying on. We can see that about 42% of builders believe that the economy is getting better, 35% believe it's getting worse. And we also see that on a year-over-year comparison between 2023, 24, and 25, builders are still struggling with higher material prices, mortgage rates, and labor and inflation. They're actually faring better than they have in previous years on things like land availability, buyers' mortgages, environmental regulations. And so net, I actually think that our builders are doing a little bit better. They are still cutting spending in areas like staffing and vehicles and office space. Fortunately, in my mind, in 2023, they were actually cutting back on sustainability upgrades, less so last year, a little bit more so this year, but not quite as much as 2023. So they, are kind of again extracting sustainability out of their per square foot cost. But they're being a little bit more creative this year than they were, say, in 2023, finding other ways to incorporate those sustainability upgrades without it cutting into their profitability. They are telling us that their home prices are increasing slightly, or it did increase slightly in 2025, more so than in 2023 and 2024. But they are still having to reduce their home prices, offer free or discounted upgrades, and implement mortgage rate buy downs in order to sell homes. We see also that more of the builders in our audience are now offering multifamily and attached housing or townhomes than they have in previous year in order to just address market challenges. Interestingly, last year, more said they were engaging in remodeling. Than in 2023 and 25. So we're not sure, that might have just been an anomaly for last year, given who took the survey last year. We do know, and this is just a year-over-year number, that getting up to 60% of our builder audience tell us that consumers are continuing to demand energy efficient homes, as well as smaller homes, solar powered homes, healthy homes, and then resilient and all electric and connected homes are a little bit further down on the consideration set. We do see a continued increase in consumer demand as reported by our builders for energy efficient insulation, windows and doors, heat pump technology, lighting, smart home systems, even induction cooktops and solar plus storage, and then IAQ systems. Now, this one's interesting to me because this has actually been a data point that has been consistent over the last couple of years. When we ask our builder audience what's on the top of their minds, what's their global risk of highest concern, it's extreme weather and then climate change mitigation. It's not economic instability. It's not social instability or pandemics or cyber attacks or terrorism. It's definitely, sustainability and climate related challenges, which is interesting, coming from the builder audience. And again, for us, I'm glad that it's top of mind for them because hopefully that means that they're designing and building accordingly. We also see an increase in the number of builders that are starting to advertise their homes or sell their homes based on resiliency as a feature or a benefit or an upgrade. So almost a 10% increase in 2025 over the last couple of years. And now we also see that 55% of our builders tell us that resiliency is an important selling point to their buyers, and about 23% say that it's an extremely important selling point for their buyers. So the vast majority of our builder audience tells us that resiliency is, again, either important or extremely important as a sales and messaging point to their buyers. About 70% of our builder audience tells us that their buyers will pay more for resiliency upgrades. And about 45% of our builders tell us that their buyers will pay between $10,000 to $20,000 more for resiliency upgrades. And then about 25% say that those consumers will pay about $5,000 to $10,000 more for resiliency upgrades. So again, you can see the vast majority say that there's a fairly substantial willingness to invest fairly substantial dollars in those resiliency upgrades. And when we ask our builders what they're doing to enhance the resiliency of their homes, it's generally implementing durable, low maintenance materials, proper roofing or impact rated roofing, solar plus storage, rainwater harvesting, and backup power systems. I think the focus on resiliency can be explained by this chart. So 70% of our builder audience now tell us that they are having problems getting insurance for their projects because of climate events. You can see that increased by almost 45% from last year. So that's a dramatic uptick. And again, I think explains why resiliency is so top of mind for builders. And we'll talk about the consumer perception of resiliency in a minute. But I think it's not just that builders are responding to home buyer demand, and frankly, it's a very real intensifying climate events, but they are now seeing climate events impact their own businesses. Now let's switch over to some of our consumer audience. Consumers are a little less optimistic than builders, believe it or not, when it comes to the economy. So 60% of our consumer audience now say that they think that the economy is getting worse. And less than 20%, let's say 18%, believe it's getting better. So that's pretty substantial. And I will tell you that those numbers are more exacerbated than last year. We had a lower number of our consumer audience members tell us that they felt that the economy was getting worse. I think last year it was maybe closer to about 50%. So, clearly economic issues and affordability, again, are top of mind for consumers. We are seeing that our consumer audience is cutting back on, kind of across the board daily expenses, utility bills, travel expenses, even home renovations. So home mortgages and home down payments, fortunately, they are not cutting back on as much. So we suspect when we analyze this data that they're just budgeting for that more. And there's less of a fluctuation than, that they feel on a day-to-day basis, say, than on for, say, daily expenses. And then, they're more, it's easier to cut, say, travel expenses than a mortgage. We do also see, again, kind of those day-to-day expenses. They're curbing, our consumer audience is curbing spending in areas like dining out, entertaining, travel, groceries, apparel, even to a certain extent, some household goods. And we see in general, and again, this is pretty consistent over the last couple of years, that about 35% of our consumer audience say that they're ratcheting back about 10 to 20%. And then about 22% of our audience say that they're ratcheting back less than 10%. But still, if you look at total household budgets, that's still a pretty substantial number. When we look at what our consumer audience is having to do in order to just, kind of stay afloat, they are dipping into savings, they're charging more on credit cards, they're waiting on vehicle purchases, they're actually borrowing more, in 2025 from friends and family than they have in the past, or taking second jobs. And to a certain extent, they're stopping to look for a new home. When we look at views on home ownership, given economic conditions, about 30% of our audience say that they're just going to stay in their home and remodel it. About 25% say that they want to make their homes more energy efficient. Some say that they're going to move to a less expensive neighborhood or purchase a smaller home. So, again, they're kind of getting creative. And then when we ask about purchasing a new home, 20% say that they've stopped searching. They're putting themselves on the sidelines. Another almost 20% say that they would buy one if they could afford one. So again, that's 40% right there that's put themselves on the sidelines. So when we talk about our 2026 projections, which I will do in just a minute, and we talk about opening pent-up demand, you can see right here that if 40% have put themselves on the sidelines because of economic conditions, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of pent-up demand that we anticipate will open up as mortgage and interest rates come down. Generationally, I didn't put in the generational breakdown for this particular chart. However, it's probably not surprising that when we look at this generationally, boomers and Xers make up more of the nearly 20% that say that they own a home and they're happy with it. Whereas millennials and Zs really are more of the ones that have put themselves on the sidelines, or they're kind of waiting to see what's happening with rates and the economy, or they're just happy renting. Now, I mentioned resiliency numbers and data and insights with respect to builders, focusing on that now with respect to consumers, since resiliency seemed to be the thing that is kind of second to the economy in terms of being top of mind for our builder and consumer audience in 2025. When we ask consumers how much they'll spend, and this is close to the numbers that builders reported, but about 23% of our consumer audience said that they will spend $10,000 to $20,000 on resiliency upgrades. About nearly 30% say that they'll spend $5,000 to $10,000, but about 9% said that they'll spend $20,000 to $30,000 more on resiliency upgrades. That's not a number that showed up in the builder numbers that they reported. So again, consumers say that they'll spend a little bit more. We tend to discount this chart a little bit because when you see a survey and you say, oh, this is how much I'll spend, I think that there's something nice to say, yeah, I'll spend a little bit more. So we tend to focus on the builder numbers as a more realistic baseline and metric, but still interesting to kind of compare the consumer with the builder numbers. And then again, similar to what builders reported, the upgrades that consumers are implementing are things like upgraded roofing, backup power and battery storage, durable materials, solar plus storage, stormproof or impact rated windows, etc. Now, when we ask our consumer audience why they're not investing more in resiliency upgrades, it's really about cost. Again, economic factors. And then, 20% just said, look, I haven't thought about it. It's not a priority. So that's interesting. And when we ask what would encourage them to upgrade their homes and products in their homes to support enhanced resiliency, lower insurance premiums, utility, state, or federal rebates, and then, green financing options, again, all tied into those long-term operating costs. And, I think that right now we're in this very unique point of time where we're seeing an explosion in insurance premiums. And so this chart on the left is actually from the New York Times. This is one of the charts I have in here that's not from Cognition. You can see here that there's been like an 85% increase in annual insurance premiums in the last decade in Florida and 144% increase in Nebraska and, other states you can see there. And the problem, though, is that right now, these resiliency upgrades are not always getting included in insurance actuarial decisions, and they're not resulting in lower insurance premiums. And they should. And so this is actually a big industry problem for us because as we see the insurance sector stretched, if the insurance industry goes down, the whole economy goes down with it. Certainly the housing sector goes down with it. And we see what's happening right now with these large insurance carriers pulling out of certain states entirely or jacking up insurance premiums. And that is an unsustainable model. So we as building professionals really have to start advocating for and figuring out how we can get these resiliency upgrades incorporated into decisions that these large insurance companies are making to offer lower insurance premiums and some kind of incentives for builders and developers to enhance the sustainability of the communities and the homes that they offer, and then for homeowners to invest in that as well. We do see that there has been an increase in the utilization and deployment of climate responsive design across all four generations. Again, a little bit more for younger generations than older generations. Okay, so that's our 2025 data. I want to shift now and look ahead into 2026. Fortunately, we do see some signs of relief in 2026. Home prices are expected to rise modestly, nothing major. We don't, anticipate any huge increases in housing costs because they're already, incredibly high and causing affordability challenges for buyers. With that said, we do anticipate that mortgage rates are going to actually drop to under 6%. It was, projected to be about 6 to 6.2%. I've just recently read that now there are projections that mortgage rates might fall to 5.8, 5.9% by year end. Certainly, we know there's an announcement in an hour and 15 minutes by the feds to see if they're going to drop rates, interest rates. We'll see what happens there. I talked about inventory levels and the lock-in effect, how we see that a lot of those younger generations in particular have put themselves on the sidelines. We do anticipate that if interest and mortgage rates come down, that lock-in effect is going to open up and we'll see more people selling their homes. Activity in the existing home sector actually spurs new home sales as well. It just spurs the whole market. So we do expect that sales volume will increase somewhere around the 8-ish% level. And again, a lot of pent-up demand will start driving activity. With that said, unless we see any big changes in, utility costs and insurance premiums and, any sudden stop in climate events, which we don't anticipate, affordability will continue to be a challenge in 2026. So I think that within the housing sector, housing fundamentals are pretty strong. We don't anticipate, land prices are still stable. I think when land prices are unstable, that's when we see kind of big shifts in home pricing. We don't anticipate any huge ups or downs, but we do think that there will be some thawing of, kind of some of the frozen elements that we've seen over the course of the past year or more. Again, really driven by younger generations entering into the market either for new first-time homes or for move-up homes. And I think that really dictates the types of homes that we need to continue to design and construct because these younger generations are looking for smarter, healthier, less expensive in terms of operating costs, homes that will protect them during storms and wildfires. And, that's just an inevitability in terms of consumer demand. Now, there's a few other dynamics that I just want to go through in our last couple of minutes before we open it up to questions, because I think these are really important. We are in an unprecedented moment in time, truly, where we're seeing climate stress converging with incredible demand for AI. And data centers are driving up energy and water demand. So we're seeing that the build out of data centers are not only anticipated to increase energy demand in the US by about 55% by 2030, maybe 2035, and increase the average utility bill, energy bill for homeowners by somewhere between 8 to up to 25, even 30% in some markets. So that's a huge impact on monthly utility bills for consumers. But on top of that, data centers are just water starving, and they use a ton of water, and a lot of data centers are being built along the Mountain West and in the Southwest and in areas that are already drought stricken and water parched. And so this is not an abstract concern. In fact, climate exacerbated drought already represents an estimated 760 billion in climate risk to US municipal bonds. So that's higher than the number for hurricanes and wildfires combined. So drought is actually our number one most expensive climate risk here in the US. It's a little bit quieter because you don't have a big drought event where a whole neighborhood floods or goes up in flames, right? It's not as dramatic in terms of media coverage. But what it's actually doing is it's causing municipalities to go bankrupt because they can't keep up their infrastructure, or they actually have to pay to bring water in so that their people and their businesses can have showers and running water and can manufacture. So, I think that we're seeing, this kind of hidden risk and misaligned incentives and fragile systems collide with the upkeep of infrastructure and collide with the realities of keeping municipalities and communities functioning. And I think that if we ignore this risk in this climate risk in our financial system and in our insurance risk analysis and our housing valuations, it won't disappear. It's just going to show up later as a larger crisis. I think that also what we've seen in 2025 that's been unprecedented and that we'll continue to see moving forward is this growing distrust in the grid and an increasing desire for energy independence. So actually, Sunrun recently conducted a survey that showed that 80% of homeowners worry that AI data centers will drive up their energy costs. 68% doubt that their utility can keep up with rising demand. 81% have experienced at least one power outage in the last year, and only 11% felt very prepared for that last outage. Now, on the flip side, that same survey indicated that 91% of homeowners believe that home solar plus storage solutions strengthen the grid, and 92% believe that, or say that they are willing to share their excess energy with neighbors during peak demand. So, in other words, homeowners are kind of shifting from being energy users to being energy collaborators. They want to participate. They're ready to kind of move into this energy optimization role. And so I think that we're going to see an explosion in distributed energy resources, solar plus storage and geothermal systems on a community scale that can offset kind of unreliable and expensive energy from the grid. I think we're going to see a proliferation in virtual power plants or distributed power plants. So VPPs, they're sometimes called DPPs. That's kind of interchangeable. And those VPPs in some cases can actually become a revenue source for both homeowners and builders, which is a really exciting model. And I think once we start bringing money into this equation, it's going to become even more adopted and more compelling again for all stakeholders involved. I think, as I mentioned earlier, and we saw the data, resiliency and the insurance fiasco is really emerging, where we see resiliency not just as a buzzword, but being incorporated into business models. So, as I mentioned, we're now living in a world where, water shortages can trigger municipal bond downgrades, where wildfire smoke can shut down cities hundreds of miles away from the flames, as we've seen with the Canadian wildfires, and where a single hyperscale data campus can absorb the energy and water needs of an entire region. And so, I think that we're going to continue to see climate events impact balance sheets. And we're going to have to start seeing more of an incorporation of climate related risk reduction into all of those decisions and equations on a state, on a municipal, on a utility, on a development scale, on a community scale, and on a household scale. Now, we're seeing climate volatility accordingly require new performance standards, right? So, extreme heat and flooding and wildfire and smoke and drought are all demanding new resilience approaches in design and infrastructure and community planning. And, I think that kind of, I like to say drastic times call for commanding leadership. So, I mentioned a tale of two types of builders earlier with respect to those that are really just adhering to lowest price per square foot to drive profits and extract cost versus those who are saying, nope. I'm using sustainability, resiliency, energy independence, empowerment as a value added benefit to my buyers. And that second type of builder are the ones that are now designing homes that can maintain livability during outages. They're accelerating electrification paired with on-site generation and storage. They're prioritizing water efficiency. They're ensuring indoor air quality and thermal health are baselines, not upgrades. They're partnering with municipalities and utilities on community scale solutions. They're embracing transparency and they're planning for and pricing climate risk accordingly. And when we see those builders doing that, then the results are pretty transformational. We're seeing these microgrid neighborhoods and circular water communities and net positive homes and climate adaptive streetscapes. One lesson learned, though, kind of the hard way, and I'm going to use Babcock Ranch in Florida, which has really become a national symbol of what a climate-ready master plan community can look like in practice, because Babcock Ranch has deployed, full solar plus storage, infrastructure, all kinds of smart water and kind of biophilic elements. They actually utilized the natural ecosystem like mangroves to absorb floodwater. And they were the only community in Central Florida that did not flood after major hurricanes. I think it was Ian and Milton. And whereas their surrounding neighborhoods, flooded terribly, and there was a huge amount of damage and loss of kind of value, equity, and even life. And yet, Kitson and Partners, the developer of Babcock Ranch, tells us that those homes are not right now. They're not receiving lower insurance premiums, and clearly, that's a broken system. That's indicative of a broken system. So we have to, as I mentioned, shift from this price per square foot to value per square foot across the board so that we can integrate that enhanced value into those insurance premiums, into mortgages, et cetera. And then, the last couple of kind of market dynamics and transformations that we think will continue to proliferate in 2026 include resilience as affordability, right? So more buyers will equate resilience upgrades, again, backup power, hardened envelopes, fire and flood mitigation with long-term stability. We think that there will be this continued obsession, and I mean that in a good way, with operational costs. Looking at what we call PITM, right? So instead of PITI, principal, interest, energy, and or taxes, insurance, will include the utility bill, will include energy, will include maintenance. And these will become streamlined and baseline for decision making across the board. We'll see health as a baseline. So, the demand for indoor air quality, low toxic materials, moisture management, acoustic comfort, sleep quality, mental health, all these things are of paramount importance to younger generations, and they're not going to go away. We'll also see an increased demand for verification and transparency. So certifications, third-party ratings, clear and simple performance metrics. I think, we're at these historically low levels of consumer trust, and consumers want proof, whether that's in home ratings or product ratings. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to kind of continue to see distributed energy systems proliferate as we see the rollout of more VPP and DER programs, so that home buyers aren't just going to ask, well, what's my utility bill going to be? But it's, how will this home perform if the grid goes down, or if we have a climate event? Will I be safe? Will I be protected? Will I be independent? And will I be empowered? So I think the opportunities ahead for builders, building professionals, related professionals really have to do with understanding how to incorporate what consumers are demanding, what regulations are requiring more and more and will continue to require, what our climate realities are and our energy and water realities are into their business cycles, so that sustainability and the sustainability features and upgrades and benefits aren't something that can be extracted from a cost per square foot in a down market, but something that is additive and a value added benefit and just meets the market and meets market demand. And again, those ratcheting codes and requirements. I know that as Green Builder Media moves into 2026, we're going to continue asking questions like, how do we make value per square foot more than an idea? How do we turn it into a practical framework that can be adopted across the entire sector? How can we make grid interactive, resilient, healthy, high performance homes the default in every market? Because every market, frankly, is climate exposed. How can we integrate climate risk analysis into project planning in ways that enhance generational wealth, equity, as well as builder and developer profitability? And then how do we align all of the messages and the metrics around this so that we can support what we truly value, which is health and stability and resilience and community? And how can that show up then in our financial and insurance and appraisal models? So I thank you for taking the time today. Thank you again to Carrier, NV Energy, Whirlpool, and Optoglass. I think that I'm feeling very optimistic about 2026. I hope that you all are as well. I'd love to hear what's top of mind for you. Feel free to shoot me an email. My email address here is on the screen, because I think that we have an opportunity right now to really, for the first time, future-proof the homes and the communities that we design and construct and offer. And it's, I think, up to us to do that. So again, thank you so much for your time today. Mike, I think we have time for maybe just a couple of questions. So, as usual, I took a little bit longer to present than I was hoping for, but maybe we want to just ask one or two questions. And then for anyone who's asked a question that I don't get to, feel free to shoot me an email.
All right. I've got a couple questions lined up here. The first is from Patricia. She was wondering how would value per square foot translate to renters in multifamily?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the truth is that I'm not sure that it translates directly into, um, uh, let's say, renter equity or ownership, obviously. But what it does is it inherently increases the sustainability, the performance, the health and wellness, the resiliency of the home, the dwelling, we'll say, whether that's single or multifamily, that those renters are in because the actual owners have the incentive to enhance those features and benefits. So I think those renters get into a better dwelling unit, and then it also decreases the ongoing operating costs for those renters. So it would reduce utility bills. It would enhance, security and safety. The renters might not be directly paying maintenance costs. But I think, again, it just represents a better quality of dwelling unit and lower operating bills.
We have a question from Joan, and it makes me smile because I've known about this for a long time, and I'm sure you have too, Sarah. Are you aware of the national efforts to help reduce property insurance costs if your home is built to the IBHS Fortified program?
Thank you for bringing that up. I actually meant three different times to mention IBHS and the Fortified program. That is one of the tools that we have out there, the builders and developers have out there, that can kind of get that validation and verification that I mentioned, but that does actually have direct benefits in some markets, again, not all markets. But we are working with the IBHS folks, and they've been just wonderful to work with. And I think that, I hope that more builders and developers and municipalities, adopt the Fortify or tap into the Fortified program because I do think that it provides the validation. And then again, in some markets, it can offer benefits in terms of lower insurance rates. It's a great organization and a great program.
Yeah, I share the thumbs up, and I know, yes, Joan, only a few states recognize it, but hopefully it can be proliferated more and more. So David had a really interesting question, Sarah, and I don't know um, if you're in a position to answer this one or not, but I'll throw it out there because you brought up data centers. Um, what should communities be asking when evaluating these types of proposals of, hey, we want to build a data center in your community. Here's some incentives or here's some, the pitch that's made. But what should the communities be evaluating?
Yeah, it's a great question, David. So, and we actually, in our January, February issue of Green Builder magazine, we're highlighting Kansas City as a sustainable city because of the way that they are managing data center growth. And so that article will have more information than I am able to share right now. But at the end of the day, and I'm not anti-AI or anti-data center. I use AI. I think it's an excellent tool. No, I do. I think that our team uses AI. I don't fear it right now. I think there are some scary elements, but I'm not anti-AI and I'm not even anti-data center growth. I think that the question that communities should be asking is, what is the real benefit in terms of jobs and tax revenue versus resource use? And I think the more the data centers can utilize renewable energy, whether that's solar plus storage or wind in certain cases or geothermal, if they can create net zero energy use plans and submit those along with their plans for the data center build out. And then also if they can create circular water systems. And there are some great on-site water generators that actually the atmospheric generators were first created by the Department of Defense for very arid climates, right, in the Middle East. So you don't need a humid climate nowadays to have an on-site atmospheric generator. And there's some kind of large scale water generation systems that can be deployed either at a municipality scale or a community scale, or in this case, in a data center scale. So I would just not. I would urge the communities not just to look at, again, jobs and potential tax revenue, but resource use, and can these data centers actually implement circular systems? It could be that, maybe these data centers in an ideal world create enough energy and water infrastructure that it becomes beneficial to communities. I have personally not seen that model yet. But if a data center is willing to create their own microgrid for their own use, and then when they're not using energy, they could pass it along and effectively become, kind of an energy provider to a community. And same thing with water, if they can either just recirculate their own water, or, ultimately if they can use water, because they don't really need potable water in a data center. So if they can use water from municipality and then filter it and provide it back to the municipality, like that would be great. So I think that there are some creative solutions. I don't know that any of those have been deployed. I don't know that they haven't. I'm just not aware of any that have been deployed. So in theory, there's a lot of opportunity. I just don't think that theory is reality yet.
All right, we're going to put a wrap on this one. Thank you so much, Sarah, for taking the time to kind of give your insights on 2025 with the Cognition Smart Data. Look into the crystal ball of 2026. I really do appreciate that. Thank you also to the audience for attending today, asking your questions, sharing your comments. Thank you to PowerShift by NV Energy, Optiglass, Whirlpool, and Carrier for their generous sponsorship of this webinar. That concludes our webinar series for 2025. Thank you so much, not just for today, but also throughout the year. We do these for you. And so we really do appreciate you being a part of our audience and being involved by asking questions and sending us emails. We do appreciate it. We're going to be back in about a month. We won't go too far away, just about a month, the January 14th to be exact. And we're going to talk about something that Sarah was mentioning, virtual power plants. So that webinar will kick off another year of informative green building media webinars delivered right to your home or office. Very convenient. So on behalf of myself, our world-class producer, Mary Kessner, and everyone at Green Builder Media, have a happy holiday season and an inspired new year. Take care, everyone.
Happy holidays. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mary.